Okay, we are live on Facebook.
What's up, Facebook audience, and what's up, you guys? How are you all doing tonight? There it is. Make us sound louder than we are. All right, no. Don't adjust your computer and/or devices. You're not looking at the most electrifying man in sports entertainment today, The Rock. I'm Nick, your host with the most, but I'm joined by a couple of legends. First and foremost, we have former WWE Heavyweight Champion, former WWE World Tag Team Champion, and just an all-around Hall of Famer, Mr. Mick Foley, a.k.a. Mr. Shaun.
Pleasure to be here.
And then we also have down here the Dead Man, and/or the Dead Girl, former WWE Champion, Tag Team Champion, and just all-around Hall of Famer as of 2022, The Undertaker, also known as Miss Jordan Williams. And again, I'm your host with the most, and welcome to Hot Reads Live. This one is, I don't know if you can see the sign at the back, PodcastMania, where we're going to take you guys on a journey through the history of pro wrestling here in the United States. Now, when usually people think of wrestling, at least people that I have met, it's usually like, it's boring, it's fake, I don't have time for it anymore. Bring back the 90s when it was actually real. Disclaimer, it wasn't real in the 90s, they just made you believe it was real in the 90s, and that's good television. But no, and that's completely understandable. But today we're just going to discuss some facts, go over a few things. We're going to talk about what we enjoy about it. Who knows? Maybe we will open you guys up to taking a look a little bit deeper when you get the chance. I know you guys are ready because you aren't here to say you are, but I know you are. How about you guys? You guys ready?
Oh, yeah.
Showtime? Yeah. All right. I'm loving this interview. It's fantastic. So when you think about professional wrestling, when it started here in the States, it really took off in the 1800s. A little bit after the Civil War had taken place at the time. Things were tough and people were bored. They had nothing to do. We went to war and now we're just stuck at home. So thanks to the traveling circus and the traveling shows that were going on at the time, they were able to present wrestling. It gave guys an outlet to be able to cure their boredom, if you will say. Also, for amateur wrestlers, they would do it back then, and it was literally just a way for them to make some money. So they made their money, and they were perfectly fine. So from that time on, by the end of the 19th century, fast forward there, wrestling had become a huge business, and it was a popular American sport at the time. The time that came around, boxing was in, baseball, so it really kind of listed out as like the top America type sport. Then the 20th century rolls around, and things start to kind of change. While it was first part of the carnival, it kind of stepped away from that for a bit of time. And then because you had the motion picture industry taking off, you had radio taking off, people just weren't entertained by it anymore, unless that's when all the "it's fake, it's predetermined, it's not enjoyable anymore" really started. So that really had wrestling taking a hit. So they had to break that monotony. They had to do something to kind of spice it up a bit. And the people for that were three gentlemen who made up what is called the Gold Dust Trio. It was Ed Lewis, Billy Sandow, and Toots Mondin. That is not a fake name. That was his legitimate name, Mr. Toots. Those were the guys that came along, and they actually brought a lot of the innovations that we see in it today along. So you had time limit draws. You had wrestlers, instead of them just randomly fighting, you actually had angles and storylines that built up to the actual matches themselves. There was also the establishment of the good guy or the bad guy, which in the business terms is your baby face or your heels. Those are your good guys and your bad guys. That was what they established. So doing that really kind of broke that monotony that was over it at the time, and it made it a little bit more enjoyable for people. It was starting to kind of revitalize at that time. Then you had, of course, the introduction of cable television, or the TV. So the TV comes along, everybody wants to be on TV. How does wrestling propel its audience? You get TV. So promoters would buy up time slots in their area, and they would present television programs. And what these did was it allowed them to be able to tell stories in an episodic way, so that when people watched it, they were like, oh man, this is great watching it on TV. I'm gonna go go see it in person. So they go down to wherever the local show is, and then they're a part of the show. They get to be there to watch it. And it also, as much as it made the promoters have to step up and really think on the fly, it made the wrestlers have to think on the fly, because wrestlers couldn't just be the rough and rugged amateur wrestler with a good heart. They had to have personas. They had to make themselves appealing. So they created personas, or gimmicks, as they're often referred to today. And so the advent of TV, they were flashy. They had the robes. People started having hats and frills and all that stuff to make themselves stand out. Another thing with television is they had to talk now. Like before, they probably would just show up and wrestle a guy and then it'd be over. Now they actually had to speak. And by them speaking, they could develop whatever story they were in at the time. They could, as they say, talk people into the building, so they could, do their thing and get you interested and be like, hey, I want to come back and see Crusher Derrick take on that other guy, Heartbreak Hank, see what happens next week. So so by them talking and getting engagement from the audience, it really helped them to establish themselves as a persona. And also at the time, unlike you see today, a big problem is like social media and wrestling. A lot of people complain that it takes away the mystique of it. They didn't have that problem back then because they didn't have social media. So if Crusher Derrick was a violent guy in the ring in person, whenever you saw him around town, he was always Crusher Derrick. Never changed. He lived whatever his persona was, and that was called kayfabe. It's a business term of where kayfabe. You basically present it as real, and you get the people interested when they feel it's real. Because when there's a hint of realism, we're naturally nosy. We want to see where it goes. We want to see how it pans out. So that was something that they started doing with the TV. And then because of all this expansion, because of television and promotions popping up all over the place, the NWA in 1948 was created, National Wrestling Alliance. Instead of this being just one conglomerate group, this was actually a group of promotions that they would share talent, they would promote business, and they would just work together as a whole. Now, another thing that the NWA had was they established one singular world champion, the NWA World Heavyweight Champion. And this champion would go from promotion to promotion, defending his championship belt. He would defend it against the local stars. So if Shaun's the champ, and I'm the top guy here in Paducah, he would come to Paducah, challenge me, and that's how I made my name. And then if I beat him, then I take the belt and I would go face somebody else in Chicago, and that was kind of how that worked out. In fact, fun fact, first NWA World Heavyweight Champion was a gentleman by the name of Lou Thesz, who, because of his contribution, later had a move named after him called the Thesz Press. So yeah, all this ushered in what we knew as the territory days, which people were thinking the picture wouldn't work. I have a picture to kind of let you guys get a look of how it is now. You may not see it well on Facebook, but the people here will definitely have a chance to see it. Fire that up real quick, the territories. The territory era. There it is. All right, so territory era. What this meant was you had a conglomerate of territories. And promoters cannot promote outside of their territory. There were boundaries, and also, as you can see, territories took up a number of different locations. So here in New York, that took up Jersey, and then you had over here the National Wrestling Federation took up Buffalo and Cleveland. It was all acclimated at the time to different regions. So it was regional, it was territorial. They would promote shows in their area, build stars in their area. Of course, everybody had champions at the time and whatnot. So it really just established everybody having their own authenticity while being under the same umbrella. Another cool thing about it is at this point, wrestling was kind of like music. You know, when you think of the umbrella of music, you have country, you have rock, you have metal, you have heavy metal, you have metal, like rap, R&B, pop, you have all these different ones. Well, all these different territories would have their own different style that made them unique. So you went over here to Memphis, the Memphis area here. Memphis was more of that southern bar room type of brawl vibe. But then if you went up somewhere to like Detroit, they would have more of a hardcore vibe. They were more steel chairs, everybody's bleeding all over the place, all that fun stuff. So that was advent of this time too. Everybody was different, so you wouldn't get the same show everywhere you went. Somehow or another, there was a sprinkle of difference in there. And that made it entertaining, and that made it appealing to people to where they'd want to, like I said, come back every time. What promoter does not want them to come back every time? So, we go from the territories to the beauty that we know as cable television. Thing with cable television is, while the NWA had borders, cable did not. Cable could broadcast nationwide. So if you were running a show in Memphis, like I said, and you go to Atlanta, you could see that show in Memphis and Atlanta because of cable television. In fact, at the time, what we know now as WWE was the WWF, Worldwide Wrestling Federation. They were based out of New York, had a lot of their shows at MSG. When HBO was a thing, they would stream their events through HBO. And so if you had HBO, like I said, Detroit, Cleveland, wherever, you really didn't have to go all the way to New York to see a show. You could just sit in the comfort of your own home or a friend's home and watch it from there. Really saved on people having to travel and all that fun stuff. But over time, things would get worse. Because one gentleman took it upon himself to look at the rules and say, that's nice, but I got a better idea. That gentleman's name is Mr. Vincent Kennedy McMahon, who, we kind of know him. Some of us know him from memes. Others know him from yelling at him during our childhood in the 90s. All that fun stuff. But in '82, Vince Jr. would buy the WWF from his dad, Vince Sr., which I just found out, if I believe is correct, was for a total of $1 million. He purchased that company. To put that in retrospect, he bought the company from his dad for $1 million, but now, because it's a marketed company and then stocks and trades, it's now worth $9.3 billion. So yeah, really some growth in numbers there. Yeah, smooth move, man, smooth move. But he would buy it in '82, and then he would rebrand it into the WWF. And then yeah, he just started breaking all the rules. I know, right? He put that extra W in there, and it was like, we're really gonna cut that out. So instead of worldwide, it just became World Wrestling. And he's like, yeah, this is 3 letters are better to market than like 4 or 5. That's totally better. But no, he just started breaking all the rules that the NWA had established as no-nos, basically. So you had different areas would buy up time slots for their promotion in their region. Vince goes, that's nice, but I'm gonna buy up some time slots in your area too. So he started buying up time slots in different promotion areas and different territories, basically taking their TV time, which to a lot of them was currency. That's how they got people to the shows. That's how they got people interested to sell tickets. But Vince would take all that. Then he started to take top talent from areas. So if you had a big star in your promotion to beef up his own, Vince would entice them away with better offers. So you had guys like Jake the Snake Roberts. You had guys like Ricky Steamboat, all these different names, Junkyard Dog, Roddy Piper, had all these guys coming along, being offered big contracts, and you're gonna get paid what your promotion is paying you, which maybe is a few dollars, or you're gonna go to the big stage and make bang. Yeah, or as people say, we sell out, and they're like, yeah, we're gonna get paid, yeah. So they start moving over, and then, of course, with more stars comes merchandising opportunities, so then he just starts merchandising the mess out of everybody, making money off of that. But the biggest thing I think that he did that really made it go boom was when he signed Hulk Hogan, and I believe it was '83 he signed Hulk Hogan. And then in '84, Hulk Hogan wrestled the Iron Sheik in Madison Square Garden. He won the World Wrestling Federation Championship, and from that point, gave us
Hulkamania.
Hulkamania, baby. There it is. It's running wild. Say your prayers and eat your violence. But no, that all took off. Merchandising, while it was good at the time, once Hogan was the guy, boom. I mean, Hogan was on shirts, bandanas. He had his own workout set that they made for kids. It came with like little blue barbells and like a VHS tape, I think it was, and he'd work out with Hogan.
Was it movies?
Yeah, he was doing movies. He was in Rocky 3 where he played Thunder Lips. So, you know, that's fun. No Holds Barred, yeah, with, oh my gosh, with Zeus, where they made a movie that led to a match in real life, which brought them as much money, if not more, than the movie. I don't know. That's how that math. I don't know, but they made it work. So business was just taking off. So Vince goes, well, we're popular in our region. We're popular with fans. I want mainstream success. I want all the people that are that are in my promotion. I want them to have mainstream success. So he starts reaching out to like MTV, late night shows. Even some of the wrestlers appeared on like SNL at the time. But the biggest thing I think that happened was Captain Lou Albano, that's the correct pronunciation of that, did a music video with Cyndi Lauper. Anybody remember what that music video was? Girls just want to have fun. You are correct. That was the video.
I had somebody say that they were having trouble hearing. So
are you having trouble hearing me? Can you hear me now? Are they hearing me now?
So just try to.
Oh, talk bigger?
Yeah.
I got you. So thanks to Captain Lou Albano and the video that he did with Cyndi Lauper, that got them recognition, you know, because of course Cyndi starts coming over to the WWF, and everybody's watching the WWF, and she brings her fans with her. Of course, Albano already has his fans. So then MTV goes, I think we can do something here. And Vince goes, I most certainly know we can do something here. So that creates what we know as the Rock and Wrestling Connection, which gave us, like that Cyndi Lauper popping up. It gave us that cartoon. Anybody remember the cartoon with like Hulk Hogan in the 80s?
No, can't say that name.
I see some people shaking their heads, so some people know what I'm talking about. But no, that produced a whole lot of opportunities, and it got other stars over to come and lend their power to the WWF at the time. So all this happens, cross promotions, all this recognition. Vince decides that he wants to go big. And so he bets the farm on what to this day is still one of the biggest spectacles. I don't want to say ever, but looking at the numbers, it kind of adds up. It is a huge event. So then in '85, March 31st of '85, Vince promotes WrestleMania 1. And at that time, it was at an MSG, and it was broadcast to the biggest closed circuit audience, I think it said, in U.S. history. I don't know if that's been broken yet, but at the time, it was like the biggest in history. It was main evented by Roddy Piper, Bob Orton, or no, Mr. Wonderful, I'm sorry, Paul Orton, Mr. Wonderful, and Hulk Hogan and Mr. T. So Mr. T had a team, Hogan was the guy. You get no bigger than that. Plus you had guys like Muhammad Ali showed up. I think Liberace popped up for a little bit there. Yeah, it was a huge, it was a very diverse crowd, but it was huge. It was a big celebration. The audience, if you can watch it on Peacock, by the way, plug. But no, if you watch that first WrestleMania, the crowd was just electric. They were hyped. They got to see all their favorites. It was a huge success. In fact, that type of business model, when it came to pay-per-views for sports, Vince actually helped kind of pioneer and revolutionize that. Because up to that, sports pay-per-views were kind of basic, but then the idea of, oh no, we can make this a grandiose thing really started at that point in time. So big deal there. But of course, if somebody's eating a lot, unfortunately there are some that eat less. And there were a lot of promotions who, because Vince was blowing up, were struggling. They were really taking a hit to stay afloat because all their top guys were gone. and a lot of their fans follow those stars to the WWF. So that takes a hit in audience, revenue, merchandise sales, and eventually it gets tough. It gets hard for them to kind of stay afloat. Now there was a gentleman by the name of Jim Crockett who owned Crockett Promotions out of Georgia. He was trying to stay afloat, still trying to hold on to those NWA days, keep that afloat. They had moments of success prior to WrestleMania in '85. In '83, Crockett Promotions held the Starrcade, which was a smaller scale version of what WrestleMania was. It didn't have all the mainstream success that Mania did, but it had wrestlers that people knew, that people liked, and based on that alone, if you were, I guess you can say, considered a true wrestling fan, people showed up. You had Ric Flair, you had Harley Race, you had Dusty Rhodes, you had just a ton, a Legion of Doom, if I'm not mistaken, or the Road Warriors, I believe, were at that first show. It was a big show. If you were a genuine fan of professional wrestling, that was the place to be in '83. And Ric Flair won that night, so Ric Flair, the wheeling, dealing, kiss stealing, son of a gun, was holding the belt at the time, and he was very charismatic. Was not, if Hogan was eat your vitamins and say your prayers, Rick was like, I'm walking out here in a Gucci suit. He's like, I got $500 alligator suits on. I got this Rolex. I got rings for days, and I'm better than all of you, and you know it. Night and day difference between Hulk Hogan in every imaginable, conceivable way. But despite all this, financial woes got too much. Crockett had to sell his promotion. And what he ended up doing was selling it to a gentleman that some of you might know by the name of Ted Turner. Media mogul, Ted Turner. He's the CNN guy. For those of you who may not be aware of the name, he's the CNN guy. But he bought it, and he rebranded it to WCW, World Championship Wrestling. And he said in an interview, it was really funny, he was like, we were already the top thing on cable, we were the top thing in baseball. He's like, and I wanted to get wrestling on TV so we could be the top of that too. He's like, I wanted to be better than Vince and kick his butt. That is a legit, I was about to say, that was a legit statement that this man made. And then they asked Vince about it, and he's like, I just remember getting a call from Ted Turner, and he's like, Vince, I just want to let you know, I'm in the wrestling business. He goes, okay. And Ted's like, just wanted you to know that we're in the same business now. And Vince is like, no, we're not. And Ted's baffled. He's like, what are you talking about? He's like, how are we not in the same boat? He's like, well, you're in the wrestling business. He said, I'm in the entertainment business. We are in two totally opposite directions with this thing. So of course Ted wasn't too happy about that. But all that happens. We fast forward a little bit. We get into the '90s. Hulkamania has kind of died down, if not just kind of fizzled out. And the WWF, they're feeling it. They know. They're like, this isn't as big as it once was. We gotta shake it up a bit, get it, get the juices going again, as they would say. So January 11th, 1993, Vince takes another leap. He puts a show on prime time on the USA Network, Character One. I don't know if that's still their stuff. That was their best one. Anyway, WWF Monday Night Raw debuts on the USA Network. And while WCW at the time, around 93, 94, they were signing old WWF guys. So they were signing Macho Man, they were signing Jim Duggan, they were signing the Nasty Boys, they were signing, eventually they would sign Hulk Hogan in 94. But that was their focus, that was their bread and butter, were old names. But then Vince came through with Monday Night Raw, and he was looking at more younger guys. He was going more with Bret Hart, he was going more with Shaun Michaels, he was going more with The Undertaker, who actually main evented the first ever Monday Night Raw episode. So you get to say you were the first there. So yeah, he was going in a different direction. He also had Razor Ramon and Scott Hall. great guy, the bad guy. So it was, at this time, yeah, Hulkamania was the golden era of wrestling. They were fixing over now into what's known as the new generation era, which is where it was more athletic, it was more talent, it was more flamboyancy with the gimmicks. Shaun Michaels was just like coming out in diamond earrings and glitter and yeah, this whole thing. And it takes off. It's successful. So WCW, after going through a lot of, oh my goodness, they had so much backstage issues going on. They had changes in management. They had changes in direction because of the change in management. And to the point where even the talent was like, all I did was show up, and when I got there, they told me. Because things were just always seemed like they were constantly changing. So around 94, they signed over a new EVP by the name of Mr. Eric Bischoff, who becomes the EVP of WCW at the time. And Bischoff, much like Crockett before him, was like, I need to set up WCW to where it's a legitimate competitor. So he changes everything about the promotion. Again, this is out of Georgia. So everything's Southern wrestling, you know, everybody's got a Southern thing about them in the promotion. Bischoff says, no, we're nixing that. Anything even related to Southern. That went for announcers, that went for wrestlers, that went for managers, that went to, I even think down to staff in some cases. Complete revamp. They got better cameras, better lighting. They signed Hulk Hogan in '94, which was a big deal because everybody thought Hulk Hogan was the Vince guy. You know, he was WWF through and through. And Hulk was like, no, he's paying me better money. I'm gonna
Go with the cashes.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with the cashes. So he goes that direction. Then they start wanting to attack prime time, like Vince does. You know, Vince has Ross and wants to do his own thing. Bischoff was in an interview and he was like, I remember going in Ted's office and being like, Ted, I want to go head to head with the WWF. Or I'm sorry, Ted told Eric he wanted to go head to head with the WWF. And he's like, think of some ideas. And Eric's like, ooh, I know, give me prime time. Eric's like, but I know you won't do that. And Ted's like, you got it. Okay. So then he starts putting in motion all the things that he would need to make the show happen. So Ted Turner, being the mogul that he is, just established TNT, the network, that now, last I saw, the gym is just playing Marvel movies on. But no, he establishes TNT, and one of the first things he brings along is WCW Monday Nitro in September of 1995 on TNT. And it's a big hit. Main evented by Hulk Hogan, who was the world champion at the time. And one of the things that hadn't really been done in wrestling at the time happened at this first show, and it kind of set the precedent for shows following. In that first episode, Hogan's in the main event, he's wrestling, he wins, but then he's kind of starting to get jumped. And then out of the crowd, out of nowhere, comes Lex Luger. Now, mind you, this is 95. Luger was signed to the WWF at the time, earlier in 95, but his contract was up, and he didn't re-sign with WWF. That wasn't common knowledge. But through knowing some other people, he gets in touch with Eric, and Eric's like, I want to do a thing. And Luger's like, what do you want to do? He's like, I want you to walk out on TV on Monday night. Don't tell anybody. He's like, I want it to be a surprise for the show. And Luger's like, sounds like a first, I'm in. So then, first episode of Monday night, Luger walks out. No one had a clue, not even the boys in the back had an idea that Luger was popping up. Luger just shows up. And that was the precedent Eric wanted. He wanted, if Monday Night Raw at the time was being taped like a couple days prior, WCW was live. And because of that, as time progressed, they would start actually giving away match outcomes on WCW for the WWF. So as the shows progressed, it'd be like, don't bother turning to the other channel. Let me run down the card for you. Shawn Michaels wins the belt back. Goldust loses. Undertaker takes a dive. Don't worry about all that. This is where the big boys play. Stay with us. That was their business model for the longest time. And it got them some attention. I think another big thing that they got with attention-wise was he he took, Bischoff would take inspiration from different places. So he would take inspiration from Japan. There were different promotions in Japan, like War and Japan Pro Wrestling. And then in Philadelphia, there was a small little organization that nobody really talked about. It was more underground, Extreme Championship Wrestling, which is ECW. Where if WCW and WWF were for kids and aimed at children, ECW was not. It was very much directed toward a mature audience and adults, and was not children's entertainment in the slightest. But what they were doing was doing compelling TV. They got people watching, they got eyeballs. So Eric sees this and is like, okay, I'm going to take some people from here, I'm going to take some people from here, I'm going to take some people from Mexico, I'm going to take some people from over here, and we're going to put them all together and bring them here. So you had a international locker room, so to speak. You had luchadors, you had strong style guys, you had European wrestlers, you had just a litany of things that at the WWF they didn't have. So doing all that gives us the idea. Are you guys familiar with the
About 90s wrestling?
Mm-hmm.
What parts?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at this point in time, you had like Sting in WCW. You had all that. Are you guys kind of familiar with that time of Hogan kind of?
In my defense, I wasn't born until late 90s, so.
Okay, factual. Shaun?
Yeah, right. Yeah, I know a little bit about like Hogan being like the bad guy, and like him and Sting like kind of like being like the good guy for a little bit, and yeah.
That was, and honestly, that was a big thing. So Hogan turned bad. Again, Hogan was, kids loved Hogan, parents loved Hogan, everybody loved Hogan, but Hogan was getting stale. Again, everybody wasn't for the state of prayers, getting two shoes type thing. It was playing out real fast. So Bischoff put a plan in motion, and it started with two gentlemen actually. One was named Scott Hall, or when the WWF was known as Razor Ramon, and then you had Kevin Nash, who was known as Big Diesel, and they would invade WCW as the Outsiders. And this was new because in pro wrestling, something like that hadn't happened. You hadn't had crossovers, because people are like, I just saw Razor and Diesel like a week ago in the WWF. Why are they here now? Well, again, contracts come up. And in this case, both guys had families, and Vince wasn't able to pay them as much as he once was. Because even though they were doing well, WCW was doing better. So when they were presented with the opportunity to stay where they were or leave, they left. They didn't want to, but again, had families. So they become the Outsiders. Audiences are just like, we don't know what's happening. We don't know what's going on. Well, then 1996 rolls around. Actually, were you 96?
I
You were
was,
96.
yes.
Okay, yeah, she was 90. That makes a lot more sense.
I was 10 at the time, so.
Shaun was like, I wasn't doing that much in the full. But no, the Bash at the Beach 96 for WCW happens. It's WCW versus the NWO, because it's like, NWO was like, no, it's ours, and it's like, ah. Well, then Hogan comes out, and everybody's like, oh, Hogan's going to save everybody. Does
Exact
not.
opposite.
Yeah, it does the exact opposite of save everybody. He turns on the WCW, and they form the New World Order. And it is the biggest thing in wrestling, I want to say ever. Just because it was, the fact that it was Hogan. They had teased the idea of doing it with somebody else, but Eric Bischoff was like, I think it would make more sense if Hogan did it.
Yeah.
And so now that Hogan did it, you have people copying that same type of story outline to this day in wrestling. It's insanity.
I remember Mom was like hooked to it. Like,
Yeah.
my mom could not stop watching wrestling at that point.
And then the thing was, because they were doing things that were just, you didn't do. You didn't go backstage during wrestling shows. But when the NWO came out, they could be in the back beating up a tag team, and the cameras are like, well, we gotta go find it. So they go with their cameras, and they're laying out a tag team with baseball bats and iron pipes in the back. And to fans, this was exciting. This was new. We didn't know what was going
Behind the scenes almost.
Yeah, and it was
Yeah.
giving them a peek behind the curtain while also having that mystique of you didn't know what was real and what wasn't. There were a couple occasions where things had gotten so real to people that they actually called like the cops and like the local fire department because people were watching it on TV in the area and they were like, oh my God, they're actually like doing this stuff. This is a problem. So they would end up calling it.
But it's all TV.
Yeah, but it's all TV. So Eric Bischoff's like, oh, this is great. So again, they're doing great for like, I think 83 weeks, 38 weeks, something like that. And the WWF hasn't changed. There's still Kitty, there's still clowns and trash guys and, Trash man. I think like the only thing that they really had going was like Bret Hart, Taker, Shawn Michaels, all the other guys that left. So Vince is like, we gotta do something. We gotta change it. So, we are given what I think is one of the most talked about periods in professional wrestling as a whole. The Attitude Era. Which is where you got guys like the most electrifying man in sports entertainment, The Rock. You're given this gentleman here who just flings himself off of any and everything Mick Foley or Cactus Jack or Mankind.
Glutton for punishment.
Yeah, glutton for punishment. Dude loved. He had like multiple personality disorder. It was really oof. And then you had the Western, tombstone making? What's the word? Or coroner. That's the word.
Yeah.
He goes from that to being a super dark, grim wizard guy in The Undertaker. So basically what they did was Vince looked in his locker room and was just like, okay, we gotta make this a little bit more real. So he literally tells all the guys, he's like, I want you to take what you are as a person, dial it up to 10 and make it work. And that was a mistake, because even he himself said, he's like, I didn't realize I had a roster full of rebels and hard-headed individuals. So as, in 96, you had Stone Cold Steve Austin, who started Austin 316. That really launched everything. Then in 97, you had The Rock, you had Triple H, Shawn Michaels, DX. You had, Taker was taken off. You had just so much was happening as time went on. In fact, in 99, you started having people like Chris Jericho, who was in the WCW. He was the guy there. Yeah. He went over to the WWF in 99. Big Show was a big guy in WCW, a legitimate big guy. He was like 7'3", huge guy, real young, great, in the ring for what he was, a giant.
Mark Henry.
He jumps over. Yeah, you just had people jumping ship from WCW over to WWF because people were more drawn to WWF. Like it was, they were saying and doing things on television that just you would only see on like Howard Stern or like Beavis and Butthead or Jerry Springer. They just turned it all up to 1,000 to the point that parents were calling and like, we're not going to let our kids watch anymore. And they're just like, okay, your kids aren't really our audience anymore, but hey, whatever. And then they're like, we go to a live event and it's just kids in the front row, and we're like, okay. So no, we're at this time. What did you guys kind of like about that?
I would say that's the era that I really got attached to like wrestling, and that's where like most of my knowledge comes from wrestling. Is I just remember sitting around the television, like I said, my mom started getting into it back when WCW and Hogan became a bad guy, and so my mom, she was like, this is something that I bet my son would really like watch, and so she would put it on television while she was cooking dinner or whatever, and it was a large block of television that I could be babysat and sat in front of it. And so, yeah, I just got hooked by all these different personalities, and like, my uncles and stuff would tell me that it's reals, and then like my mom would say it's not real, and so there's like this big mystery behind it. And so, but I was like, my head looks real, and so yeah, I was just drawn toward their different personalities, and they made me want to do those things that they were doing on television. I felt like I could get thrown to the ground.
Through a cell.
Yeah, I was like, that seems pretty easy to me. And so I was really drawn towards that. And so, yeah, and that's most of my wrestling knowledge is from this era.
I know you did some research over the past few weeks of
I
leading
did,
up to this. What
I
did
did. It's
you?
still early 2000s for me, but I will say, considering that I would have been 3.
It's
but,
fine. Logistics.
I would say, same with what Shaun said, wrestling was with, like, watching with my dad, my uncle, just sitting around the television, sometimes the only girl just sitting there enthralled with what's happening. I don't know, I just really liked it. Undertaker obviously was the moment for me. You can't tell? Weird. Crazy. Thank you, I greatly appreciate it. But yeah, so I'd say.
Yeah, and that was the thing. They wanted to be memorable. That was their whole thing. We want to be memorable. We want you to remember us more than the company. Again, another big proprietor of that was ECW. ECW was, again, that hardcore blood and guts type thing. And so Vince was like, we'll do that. We'll just kind of make it more of a grand scale thing.
So they did production, ladders, tables, all those kinds of matches.
Oh, dude, the matches that came through at that time, the Hell in the Cell match, which was literally, if you took a steel cage and just put a roof on it and just made it a little wider, that was it. And like the first one was Shawn Michaels and Taker, which I think Shawn won.
Yeah.
And then the next one was with Foley and Taker, and Foley just got pummeled that night.
My favorite match of all time. It's long. Yeah.
He got tossed off the cell to the concrete floor because they didn't have padding; it was just hard floor. So he
It's
gets
on the announcer's table, right?
yeah, he gets tossed to the announcer's table onto the concrete floor. They're carrying him off. He gets down, goes back up to the top, proceeds to fight with Taker. Taker throws him through the top of the cell, and his body just crashes into the floor, and he's stuck there, just indenting in the ring, and his 2 front teeth are like through his bottom lip. Like it was just, it was rough. It was rough, but that's what they did to help get the product noticed.
I do have a question in regards to that match. Is that the match? There's a really cool picture online of Taker on top of a cell, just like looking down. That's the one that's been thrown.
That's it.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's the picture.
That is iconic.
It is an
so cool.
It is an iconic match. It really
It
is.
There's lots of things that went wrong that made it more memorable.
Yeah, it was everything
He wasn't
that
supposed
could
to
have
go
went wrong.
through the
Yeah,
cage that way and all these
he
other
wasn't
things.
supposed to go through. His body definitely was not supposed to
Yeah.
break the ring. He definitely was not supposed to have his 2 bottom teeth through his bottom lip. So he does all this, goes in the back, and Vince is like, 1, that was a fantastic job. 2, don't ever do that again. And Mick's like, okay, I probably am, but okay. But no, you get like tag team ladder matches.
Yeah.
Like Hardy Boys, Dudley Boys, Edge and Christian, Triple Threat TLC, tables, ladders, and chairs matches. You get hardcore matches. There was just so much was going on at the time. So all this is happening. We're now fast forwarding to about 99, early 2000. WWF is still doing this. WCW is unfortunately doing this because of backstage stuff. You had contracts that were, I can determine what happens in my match. I can win all the time if I want, and that's just how business is done, not good business. So eventually doors close in 2001, and Vince buys his competition. I forgot how much the price was, but he bought them for a pretty penny. So in 2002, he becomes World Wrestling Entertainment, so the World Wrestling Federation. They kind of stepped back from Attitude Era and the over-the-topness of that, get more into the ruthless aggression, where you get guys like John Cena, you get Batista. Look, dude came out on live television and was like, I need someone with a ruthless aggression. And you got guys like John Cena, you got Kurt Angle, Batista, Brock Lesnar, Randy Orton. You get all these guys. Edge stood out, Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit, all these different people. They just become huge stars. Some of them were former WCW guys, Rey Mysterio, former WCW guys, and they just become big names now in the WWE. And now to this point, WWE is just a huge global monster. They just had WrestleMania this past weekend. 80,000 night one, 81,000 night two event. And I compared that to the Super Bowl this year, and from what I read for the Super Bowl, I think it was like 67 to 70,000 people. So that just kind of tells you how big of it is. It's big on TikTok, Instagram, all the social medias. It's just a huge monster. But there's alternatives, because not a lot of people love the WWE. The WWE isn't everybody's cup of tea. You have different promotions, kind of like the territory days. You have AEW, you have Impact Wrestling, you have Championship Wrestling in Memphis. Then you have some areas where it may not be on TV, but they just hold live events. California, there's so much content now, so many promotions and stuff, that it's just, wrestling is just, you can find whatever you want in wrestling. Like in music, this form may not be for you, but you can find what you want under the umbrella. So yeah, that's kind of just the history of how everything with wrestling kind of started. Now I know you guys have your favorites, so you guys want to list off your top 5 favorite wrestlers?
Sure, we can do that.
Who wants to go first?
You go first?
Rock, paper, scissors?
Yeah.
I was about to say, I think that was the underlying thing, that she wanted you to go first.
Yes, I'll go first. Yeah, no problem. Like I said earlier, I'm dressed as Mick Foley, do love, and so Mick Foley has always been my favorite, just because, like I've said before, he was not the most in shape person in wrestling, and so I kind of admired that he just relied a lot on his personality and the punishment he put his body through to get through the matches and everything. And he was kind of always the underdog, and I really enjoyed that. And I do like the baby faces. I do like the good guys in wrestling, and I like seeing them succeed. And he was definitely all of his personas were a good guy. And so he was my number one. Of course, Stone Cold Steve Austin, really like.
Stone Cold.
He literally reminded me of everybody in my family, and so I thought that he was just like another uncle to me.
Just another uncle.
Just coming in and beating him. He had the leg brace on, and my dad had a really bad knee accident, and my dad wore the same exact the same exact knee brace that Stone Cold did. So I was like, oh man, if my dad's out there, he's literally just like Stone Cold. If he's got a bad knee, my dad's got a bad knee. and so he can do it, my dad can do it. And so I really admired him, and he had a great finisher. Rey Mysterio, I really enjoyed him, even though I didn't watch much of WCW where he was on. I really liked the idea of a really small guy, because everybody else was huge in wrestling. And Rey Mysterio was just this little tiny wiry guy, jumping off the top ropes, just doing spins around the ropes itself, doing all these cool tricks that nobody else was even attempting to do.
Didn't even think of it.
And I really enjoyed that. Just super high flyer. I really enjoyed Edge too, out of everybody. I don't know. He stood out to me as far as a good tag team partner with him and Christian. He was briefly in the Brood, which was a trio tag team, and they're all vampires supposedly. And as a kid, Blade had just come out and everything, and I was like, oh, these guys are really cool.
I could see the excitement. So in '99, the Brood, they would be this ring of fire, and they would start just elevating through the floor.
What?
And their theme song may or may not be on my gym playlist. Putting that out there. But no, they would rise up through the floor, and it was Gangrel, Edge, and Christian, and they would walk to the ring as a trio.
Vampires.
It's vampires. Gangrel had a goblet, which was full of blood, and so he would stand on the steps, sip, and just
spit blood.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. So the Brood was their theme song was good.
Yeah. So as a kid, I was like, well, these guys are probably the coolest guys I've ever seen in my entire life.
And they wore the frilly shirts.
The old vampire, really Captain Buccaneer shirts.
I love it.
So they wore that. And then Triple H, I think he's just very charismatic, pound for pound. He's just super awesome wrestler. He would wrestle against Stone Cold, and those two my favorite people at the time. And so just watching them go back and forth as either the good guy or the bad guy, because they both did a lot of flip-flopping, and I really love that dynamic between those two. They're great.
So good, so good. So that's Shaun's top 5.
Okay.
Jordan, you're not getting out of this.
I
It's
know,
your top
I'm
5.
quite aware, sealed. So I'm gonna go in backwards order. I'm gonna
Okay.
do 5 to 1.
It's a
I feel
better
like
idea than what I did.
Hindsight is definitely 20/20.
Thank you for taking that for me, Shaun. I appreciate it. So let's see. Number 5 would be Seamus. He's representing the Gingers in Ireland. He's just a cool dude. I don't have too much to say about him, but I thought he was pretty cool as a kid. He sticks out in my memories. Triple H. So my dad was a big fan of Triple H. I just remember thinking he was a really good wrestler, but definitely not one of my top tier favorites. Like, no one take offense to that, please, and thank you.
No, don't take offense to that.
Don't take offense. However, he does come into the top 5 for me at number 4. And then number 3 is Kane. Super scary, cool, definitely gave a little bit of serial killer vibes, just a smidge, right? And he was in a movie as a serial killer.
He was.
I don't remember the name.
See No Evil.
Yes, See No Evil, that's right. So terrifying, not someone you want to meet in a dark alley.
No, and then in the early 2000s, he made it worse because he wore like this one
Yes,
contact
which was so
and no
cool.
contact, and it made him scarier
Yes, and he was already scary.
as a child. So
By the
It's a
contacts.
very large man.
He's
Yeah.
a very large man.
Very scary, but as a child, I thought he was also cool. Scary cool. And then, let's see, for second would be Stone Cold. Obviously, we've talked about this, how just like ruthless and brash he was, just very like aggressive in your face.
He would
But-
just like come to the ring, flip you off, stun you, and then leave.
He would. So that's why he's at number 2. He's definitely number 2 for me. But as for my first favorite, I feel like it's kind of obvious. Any guesses from the audience?
Anybody want to guess? Come on.
The Undertaker.
There we
There
are.
it is.
So yeah, Undertaker, my goodness, I remember sitting in front of the television as a child, and the second he would come on, I was glued to the screen. I could not look away, like the rolling the eyes in the back of the head, so cool. I tried, I failed. I wanted to give it a try at least. His entrances, in my opinion, you can fight me on this if you wish, but preferably not.
Don't.
Literally. But I do think his entrances were some of the coolest. I mean, the fog, the people in the rows with the torches, and the music, the thunder, all of
Spoke
these
to your
vibes.
ear theater kid a whole bunch.
It was just full volume. It was so cool. So yeah, his entrances were top tier. His character, the costuming, the storylines, just how intimidating he was. Could you imagine being in the ring and he's just approaching?
I mean, I've heard people in interviews that were like, I knew what was going on, but the whole time his entrance was happening, I'm like, I gotta fight him.
Mm-hmm.
He's coming to fight me. Okay, cool. And that was his whole thing. And so yeah, I don't want to be on the other side of that guy.
No, definitely.
We will be friends. I will buy you cookies.
But yeah, the music choices, just all of the above, and of course how he would like pop up underneath the ring and like drag
Oh,
people.
that was
So cool.
so great.
Yeah, just overall, he was the moment for me that I just got glued in with wrestling. He did.
The showmanship.
The showmanship was amazing.
Since we're doing this in different ways, I'm going to go with mine in no particular order. I'm just going to bounce around a little bit here. I feel like just because I'm dressed as him, I got to go with Rock. Rock was just charismatic, man. Like, he didn't have a whole lot in the way of wrestling. His was more because he came from a wrestling family. Like, in wrestling, it's early days, it was made up of families because, secrets of the business, the family better than the bank, they keep your secrets. That doesn't really stand true these days. Anyway, so he had a big wrestling family, and so he just got in the business like the rest of his family did. And so he had charisma, he started doing movies like Hogan did, he started just having that recognition. It just, even if you don't know what wrestling is, you know who The Rock is. And that to me is just awesome in so many different ways. John Cena would be next. Mr. You Can't See Me, the meme lord, as I've seen him called on the internet. I don't know. John was the kind of guy that he just had his core set of ideals, and it wasn't so much him on TV. How he was on TV was how he was in person. So he was much the person that was like, you work for what you want, you're loyal to those who help get you there, and you respect everyone. And because of that, he's been in countless movies. He's Peacemaker. He's in Scooby-Doo. I just read, I don't know if this is true or not, but I think he's supposed to be in the Barbie movie in some capacity. Okay. Like, it's just, but he just got there. You have Suicide Squad, so he's a guy that lives his truth, and I appreciate that. Shaun Michaels, great guy. Great entrance, flamboyancy. He's great in the ring. He was another one of those. He wasn't like Rey Mysterio short, but he was still a smaller guy. Yeah, he was a smaller guy, but he made up for it with his moveset and when he was in athleticism. Adam Cole, who was a newer wrestler, charismatic. He kind of reminds me to a degree of Shawn Michaels. If you ever get a chance to look him up, great guy. And then finally we got Mr. Roman Reigns, who is just dominating the sport today. He has currently been champion for 947 days, which the only other person to hold that belt longer than him was Bruno Sammartino for I think over 1,000, and I think he's shooting to surpass, or almost 1,000. He's hoping to surpass into the thousands. But he's charismatic. He's no nonsense. He's cousin to The Rock, so another one of The Rock's family that's in the business. Yes, he's The Rock's cousin. So yeah, he's just great. I love his style. I love his whole little vibe. So yeah, that's all of our favorite wrestlers. Let us know in the comments what your favorite wrestlers are. Now let's talk about finishers. We got favorite wrestlers.
You go first.
Sure. All right, let's see here. Are we going in any particular order?
You can choose however you want.
Yep, you get to choose. You're setting the tone for this.
Oh, I'm setting the tone.
You are.
Pressure. All right, let's see. I'm going to go just in random order. I like that idea. So for Stone Cold, I have to go with the Stunner, obviously.
Of course, so good.
Iconic. And then this one we were talking about earlier, I am super impressed by the diversity. Randy Orton's RKO. Holy cow.
So great.
Yeah, you can literally maneuver that any way imaginable. I was entirely impressed. You don't see it coming sometimes. And it also sucks for those that are like mid-flight. They can't do anything about it. They're just stuck. So very unfortunate, but very useful. Let's see, Shawn Michaels' Sweet Chin Music. We were talking about this one earlier. The form is iconic. So good.
Get that leg up there so high.
Yeah, the leg, it's really nicely placed. For those of you at home, I'm a dancer, so form matters.
She respects that.
Yes, the form is beautiful, very well placed. And then let's see, Jeff Hardy's Swanton Bomb, the heights. So impressive. Like, I'm very curious of how they land these maneuvers and don't die. Like, what are your secrets?
Yeah, it's painful and a lot of hoping that everything pans out.
Yeah, for real. I feel like there has to be some kind of technique behind it for sure that you're taught, but I'm just
That ring is bouncy, so that
it is bouncy, yeah, but what if you're
It's all wood, my guy. Very bouncy.
Let's see, and of course going back to my favorite for Undertaker, Tombstone, iconic. Painful, beautiful, I love it, sign me up. Let's see, The Last Ride and Chokeslam. Those are great.
Beautiful. It's just great. All right, Shaun, you're up next, my guy.
Okay. Mine are also in no particular order. I'll also say Stone Cold Stunner. As a kid, like, it was so quick, and the levels in which people would react to getting stunned would always crack me up. So there are different fall techniques.
Oh, the way they react to them are great. The Rock always did like a somersault in the air and like roll out.
Sometimes they'd go stiff and just fall to the side. It was very comical how everybody took the stunner. And then Sweet Chin Music is also on my list as well. It would just come out of nowhere, and all of a sudden, Shawn Michaels' foot would just be in your face. It doesn't matter how tall you were. If you were the Big Show and standing over 7 feet tall, his foot was going to get up there somehow.
You caught it.
And then Walls of Jericho. I really like that one, like Chris Jericho. Like it was just
Your lower back would just be a shred.
yeah, you grab your back or grab your legs and twist around and like sit on you. It's a submission move, which like, technically aren't the most like showy, but I really like the way he would
They're
get.
efficient.
Yeah,
They are efficient.
yeah. And then the rock bottom / people's elbow. I really enjoyed the rock. It was just I didn't know this until I started doing more research that it started off as trying to make the Undertaker laugh.
Yep.
Really?
Yeah, there's a bet behind stage of who could get Undertaker to laugh on screen, and so they were trying to do as funny of a bit as they possibly could, and The Rock would just like run around the ring as much as possible before just doing like just a silly
Just
like,
a silly,
just
simple
a silly
elbow
elbow
drop. Yeah.
And so they would try to do it as like as big as possible just to see, try to get him to break.
But then people liked it, so
Yeah.
he was like,
So he
"All right, I'm
kept
gonna
it.
keep doing it."
And
Yeah.
everybody really enjoyed what I did. Yeah.
It's amazing.
And then Shattered Dreams as well from Goldust. It was a move that would get him disqualified every time.
Every time.
But you know, it was kind of worth it sometimes just to knock that person out.
If you don't know what Shattered Dreams is, YouTube it. It's hilarious.
Yeah. And just Goldust in general was
Goldust in general
was a character.
He was something.
Yeah, a nepotism wrestler. You know.
For real. His dad was the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, who was big in the territory days.
Uh-huh.
And then he became it, and then nowadays you have Cody, and there's just a huge family.
Wrestling family. And then an honorable mention, instead of sweet chin music, dude loves sweet shin music.
I love
when
it.
Instead he would just run over and just kick you in the shin. It was just very
Yep.
funny. And as a kid I thought that was hysterical.
I love it. It's so good. For mine, RKO is the number one because it can literally be executed anywhere. And like Jordan said, sometimes you wouldn't even see it coming. And you have dudes coming out of moonsaults into it. It looks great. Doesn't feel the best. Super kick. Shawn Michaels, anybody, just a super kick in general. It's just, if they do it right, it's just money. The spear, mostly because of Goldberg. I don't know, watching Goldberg spear a man, it looked like he broke him in two.
Yeah, it looked super painful.
And then it's simple, but the DDT.
Okay.
When Jake the Snake would DDT somebody, it just looked deadly.
Yeah.
And depending on how some people hit it today, it looks like it just hurts. So, hashtag make the DDT deadly again. Let's get that going. But no, those are my top 5 finishers. Now to close us out, top 5 matches. I'm going to go first because I battle.
Okay.
My biggest thing with wrestling isn't so much the violence. I'm more into the story of it. If you go to a movie and it's just a bunch of explosions and action, you're not going to be entertained. But if you're led to it, it's going to be great. If there's a story behind it that makes sense, it's more appealing. And that's how it is with wrestling. First one, Shawn Michaels versus The Undertaker at WrestleMania 25 and 26. 25 started because Shawn was like, it's the 25th anniversary, I need something big. At that time, Undertaker was at 17-0 at WrestleMania. His streak started in 1991, so he's undefeated, never lost. So Shawn's like, well, I'm gonna go big. Let's do it. Shawn fails. So for the rest of the year of 2009, he's thinking about it. 2010 rolls around, he's like, Undertaker, I know I can beat you. I want to beat you. Give me one more shot. He went to Undertaker twice. Taker says no. So Shawn's like, fine, I'm going to make you do it. In the middle of a title defense in 2010, Shawn Michaels pops in the ring, super kicks Undertaker. Taker loses his title. You don't tick off the Undertaker. So Taker comes out the next night. He's like, fine, you got your match, but with a caveat. I want your career. He's like, you beat me, you say you're the guy that beat me. I beat you, everything that you love goes away. Shawn thinks about it, he's like, fine. WrestleMania comes along, Shawn is fighting his heart out. He is doing everything in his arsenal, throwing it all at Taker, and it's not working. Shawn loses, career's over. Well, then that fast forwards us into my second match, which is Triple H versus The Undertaker. Now, Triple H is Shawn Michaels' friend. Now he's like, I have to prove myself against Taker. He fails. But the caveat is that Taker doesn't walk out of the ring. He has to be carried out after his match with Triple H. Time passes. Triple H is more of the backstage role. He's more corporate. Taker's like, all I can think about is how I couldn't leave in my own power. And I don't like that. Fight me again. Hunter's like, no, you're too profitable, and I know what I have to do to beat you, but I'm not going there. So Shaun comes out. Shaun's like, dude, do it. Why aren't you doing it? Hunter's like, I'm not doing it. The only thing that got Triple H to agree to it was Undertaker told him, he said, it's probably for the best that you don't accept this match, because we all know that you could never do what your buddy Shawn Michaels couldn't do. You'd never be able to do it, because we all know Shawn was better than you anything. Triple H goes, we want this to end, we do it at WrestleMania, and we do it in Hell in a Cell. I end you, I end your streak, and it's done. So Shaun comes back, and he's like, really? You're that much of an egotist that it took someone saying that I was better than you, that you felt like you had to prove them wrong? Okay, you're right, my ego is big. You want your match, you got it, but I'm gonna be your special guest ref. So that whole story, if you don't watch anything after tonight, watch that match for the storytelling alone. The storytelling alone, fantastic. Next up, we have Shawn Michaels versus Flair at WrestleMania 24. John Cena versus The Rock at WrestleMania 28. That was a big match, Battle of the Eras. And finally, we got MJF versus CM Punk. CM Punk was one of the biggest guys back in the early 2000s in wrestling. MJF was the biggest bad guy in wrestling today, and the two just kind of bumped heads, and that's another great story that if you want to take a look. And those are my top 5. What do you guys got?
Yeah, I'll start from number 5 up. Number 5 for me was Bret Hart versus Stone Cold Steve Austin in WrestleMania 13. It's kind of the first time that Stone Cold was introduced as like a major wrestler, and like Bret Hart and Stone Cold fought. Stone Cold lost, but it ended up making Bret Hart seem like the bad guy, and Stone Cold kind of seemed like the good guy. And so Bret Hart went into that being the good guy, and so like they swapped roles, and everybody gravitated more towards Stone Cold after that match rather than Bret Hart.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of like weakened his career a little bit. Number 4, I put The Rock versus Stone Cold Steve Austin, WrestleMania X7, and that was when Stone Cold like aligned himself with Vince McMahon to get one up on The Rock, and so Stone Cold and Vince McMahon never really got along, famously, and so seeing that happen was like, as a kid, I was just like, oh no, what's the bad side? So. And then number 3 was Dudley Boyz versus the Hardy Boys versus Edge and Christian. And it was a ladder match. And a ladder match is basically where there's a ladder set up and there's a belt that's hanging from the ceiling. And so you have to climb this ladder to get the belt in order to like win. That's how you win. And that's what a ladder match is. And so like I really liked it as a kid because people would be climbing the ladder and somebody would pull the ladder out from underneath them and they'd fall, and it was.
Was that the one where Edge speared Jeff Hardy off of the like 12-foot ladder?
Yeah. He was like almost at the top, and like the whole thing comes crashing down and everything.
Yeah,
it was really cool.
wild.
And just having like 6 people potentially in the ring at the same time with also like 3 ladders was kind of ridiculous. So as a kid, I really enjoyed that. And then I put Triple H and Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Chris Jericho and Chris Benoit in the Tag Team Championship in Raw 2001. And I put that on there because I remember watching this live, and like Chris Benoit accidentally hurt Triple H, and like one of his muscles in his leg snapped. And then like so he went ahead and like fought like the rest of the way, and you could see it on camera. And then like Chris Jericho didn't know about it, and Chris Jericho put him on the walls of Jericho with his like really like hurt leg, and like you could tell that he is
not
actually
okay.
yeah. And as a kid, I was like, they need to stop this match. And then number 1 is Mankind versus Undertaker. We talked about that briefly, but that was a big turning point for me to really enjoy like. Yeah, I was like, this guy could take a punishment, and
Shaun was like, I want to be that guy.
yeah, I feel like I could just get thrown around and be all right. Yeah, that's all I want to do. I ain't think much about it.
Send us home.
Okay, so I'm gonna go from 1 to 5. So the first one is what you said, Nick, with Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels, WrestleMania 25 and 26.
Okay.
Just iconic watching Shawn try so hard to hold his own that last match and just that delivering blow. Woo. It was rough.
Hits you.
But I will say, the moment when Undertaker delivers the tombstone and then he like sticks the tongue out, to the camera, it's iconic. Number 2, Undertaker versus Triple H, 27 and 28.
So
That was what we talked about. Number 3 would be Hell in a Cell, Kane and Undertaker with the pallbearer. Also, fun fact, I forgot how just terrible of a guy Paul Bearer was. I literally forgot. I was like, dude, you're a jerk.
He's not manager.
Yeah,
he was. Paul Bearer was presented as Undertaker's father in the early '90s. Well, then Kane comes along, and it's like, Kane, you have a brother, and so that's been a dynamic for years. For years.
So that's number 3. Number 4 would be Stone Cold versus Triple H, 2001, No Way Out. But it also kind of tied in with Stone Cold versus The Rock. Number 19, we were looking at that one earlier, when he picks up Stone Cold's vest and puts on his vest. I'm like,
it's so.
you don't touch the
great.
vest.
You don't
Leave
touch the
vest
vest. You don't touch the vest.
No,
There's many things in wrestling you don't touch. Undertaker's urn, Stone Cold's vest, Triple H's sledgehammer. You just don't touch these things.
Don't do it. Leave him alone.
Just don't touch it.
It's just not cool. And then finally, this was last year, so 2022, Stone Cold versus Kevin Owens.
Yeah.
Obviously, Stone Cold is older, so he's not able to do what perhaps he was able to when he was younger, but it was still good to see him back in the ring regardless. Brought back some childhood memories.
Oh,
So.
that whole crowd was just electric.
They were.
The second his music hits, Stone Cold's music is iconic, it's glass shattering, and then just go. From the second the glass broke, the crowd was just into it. And
It was so good. I was stuck watching. So
it was great.
those are my 5.
So guys, thank you guys for all joining us, all you guys out here and you guys out there. Of course, as you know, here at the library we have tons of books, media, movies, games, all of that. Mr. Shaun, I'm sure you can attest to the wrestling games we have.
Yep, we have plenty of wrestling games.
If wrestling is something you want to give a shot to or look into, you can look at any of the things we discussed tonight, or you can find new things here at the library. And of course, you can always check www.mclib.net. You guys want to say it with me? www.mclib.net for all your library news and upcoming events. So again, thank you guys for joining us, and we will see you and all of you when we see you.